In this section, you will learn how to add pages in our application. And if you come to the app, you'll see we already have this page.tsx file. And I already told you that this page.tsx file is our home page. But how can we be able to add more pages like the login page, register page, profile page, and so on? Next.js uses a file-based routing system where we can be able to create some folders and files to add more pages in our app. And this is how we do it. So just click on app and add a new folder. And let's assume that we want to create a login page. You will just say login here and hit enter. We have to add a file in this particular folder. So I'll create a new file and I'll say page.tsx. And then inside this file, we need to export a component. And I'll say stateless functional component, hit enter, and I'll say login. And then right here, I can just have some React fragments. Let's just say login. I'll save that file. Now, inside our app, we created a folder called login. And then inside the login, we added a file called page.tsx. So you must name your file like this. If you use a different name, it will not work. And now this is our login page. So we'll get to access it by using the root URL and then saying stroke login, the name of this folder. Okay, so you can come here and we can try to see if the content will change here by saying stroke login, and I'll hit enter. Once it loads, look, we have login here and our navbar remains because our navbar it's at the root layout. So at the layout here, we added the navbar here. And I told you these children will be the different pages. So navbar will be consistent in all pages of our application. And then children is the different pages. That includes, this is the home page. And now we have added a login page. Now, how could we add a register page? It's a similar process. So I'll add a new folder inside our app. I will say register, hit enter. And then inside register, I'll add a new file and I'll say page.tsx. I will hit enter. And now right here, we are expected to export a component, stateless functional component, and I'll say register. I can return some JSX and I'll say register. I will go ahead and save that file. And by just doing that, we have created two pages. One is the login page. The other one is the register page. How do we get to access the register page? I'll just come right here and I will say register. I will hit enter. And just like that, we have register right there. Now in Next.js, there is a way to combine the different pages or group them. And this is how we would need to do. Inside app, I'll create a new folder. I will use these brackets like that. And in here, I'll say auth. Once I do like this folder will not be part of our URL, but it will be useful in grouping our pages. I'll highlight and highlight this one. I'll Control C, come to auth and Control V. So as you can see right now, we have app, then we have auth. Inside auth, we have login and register. I'll go ahead and I'll delete this and this one. So I'll highlight it, click on this, control, click on this, and then shift delete, and I'll permanently delete those two. Once we do it like this, we will still access our login page by saying root URL and then stroke login. This auth will not be part of our URL, but it's helpful in our folder structure here because it groups our features. We know everything to do with auth will now be available in this auth folder. And once we expand it, we get everything about auth, which is cool. So let's test this. So I'll come back here and I can say login. I hit enter and look, we get login. And if we try at all to say auth here, it will not work. If I say auth, that doesn't work. And even if I include exactly the way it is with the brackets, that will also give us 44 because this auth is used for grouping and it's not part of our URL. If you want to create nested pages where we have /auth /login, you will not need to include those brackets. So if we needed to say a URL that have /auth /login, we will need to come to app here, create a new folder, and this time just say auth. And then inside that folder, you can add now a new folder and you'll say login. And inside login, you'll add the page.tsx file. And in here, you'll need now to export a component. So this is how you would create a nested page where we have auth and then login and then page. So to access that, you'll need to come here and say auth and hit enter. Now look, we have this auth login which we accessed through auth folder and then through login folder. And remember, you could also have a page at the top level here at the auth here. So in auth folder, this one, we have login folder with the page, but remember, you can also have a page inside auth. So I can add a file and I'll say page.tsx and status functional component. I'll add a div and I'll say auth. I will save. So here, let's explore the folder structure. If I expand auth, we have login, and under login we have page, and also inside login we have another page. So this page, it's at the same level with this login folder. And how we access this page here where we have auth is by just saying root URL /auth. Then you get access to this page. And if you want to go to the login page, you'll say root URL /auth /login. And then you get to this auth login page. So let's test that. So right now we are in auth login, which gives us auth login, but we can also access just auth. And that is it. So as you can see, this is how we can add nested pages where we have auth, and then inside auth we have a page, and we have a login which is nested page inside our auth, which is cool. In our application, I'll be using this format where I just group our two auth pages there. So I'll go ahead and remove this one here. So I'll click on this one and I'll shift delete. In the next video, let me show you how you can be able to add dynamic pages in our application. In this episode, I'll show you how we can be able to add dynamic routes in our Next.js 15 application. And let me show you an example of one use case where we will be using dynamic routes, and that is user profiles. When I get to visit one of these users, we get to the user profile here, and you'll notice the URL here. We have this user ID, and it's the same that I am showing here dynamically. Using this user ID on our URL, it's so important because each user will have their own unique pages, and those are user profiles. And being able to create dynamic routes in Next.js is important because we will be able to automatically create all those pages whenever a user creates their account. So we won't need to hard code those values, okay? And let's use this user profile example. I will go to app, and we simply need to add a new folder in app, and I'll say user. Inside user, I'll create a new folder, and I will use these square brackets, and this is the dynamic part of our page or our URL. Here I'll say ID, or you could say user ID, and I'll hit enter. Inside this ID, I'll create a new file now, and I'll say page.tsx. We will create this particular component, status functional component, and I'll say user. Here let's return something. And just like that, we have been able to create a dynamic page which depends on this particular dynamic segment or section of our URL. And how do we get to access this page? We will just come to the browser here. First of all, we go to the first folder, which is user. Then we go to the second folder, which is dynamic. So I could say the user ID in this case is 1, or the ID is 1. I hit enter, and just like that, we will be able to access that page. This part here is now dynamic. We can say 2, and look, we still get the same page. We are showing the same content, but we could differentiate it by trying to show this ID of the user right here. And let's see how we can be able to access this dynamic part of the URL in our component and use it to either fetch more details about the user or just show it on the UI. Each Next.js component will come with a props value called params, and I can be able to extract that params from our props right here. So I'll use these curly brackets and I'll say params. This is getting the params value from props. How do we get to read these params? In Next.js 15, these params is a promise, and it will return the value of our dynamic section right here, which is this ID. And in Next.js 15, by default, this is a server component, and we can simply make it to be an async function. So here, I'll say async, and by doing that, we'll be able to await these params. And right here, I'll be able to say const. We will destructure the values from params to be equal to await, and I'll say params. Right here, I'll be able to read the values of our dynamic sections. In this case, we only have ID here. So I'll go ahead and say here ID, and we can show this ID right here. Curly brackets ID. We read this as a JavaScript variable in JSX. So again, these params is a promise, and it will return this dynamic part of our URL. So if I say ID, it should be exactly the same as we named the folder, so that we get that value and we get to await that params, and we read it like that. And we can use this ID right here to fetch the data from the server, because this is a server component. It runs on the server. So here you could fetch, and we'll be doing that later on in the course, could fetch data using the ID param. Let's see if we get this value. This complains right now because I haven't added the type, but I'll add. For now, it will still work. So let's save and go to the browser. And look, we are able to get these two, which is coming from our URL. And if I say here that this is 4 and save, look, we get 4. And just like that, you could have any value right here. The value of the user could be that long. Hit enter. We are able to get it from the URL, and we can use that ID to get the user data and show it on the UI. Now, to add the type for these params, you can come right here, use a full colon, and we'll say params is of type a promise that will resolve to this particular ID. So just say promise that will resolve to an object that will have the dynamic section, which is the ID, and the ID here will be of type string, and that is the type of our params. In the next episode, let me show you how we can get to add nested layouts in our application. In this episode, you will learn about nested layouts in Next.js. Right now, we only have one layout, which is our root layout. If you go to app, then layout, this is the root layout, and it is being shared by all the other pages in our application. So all the pages that we will have, they will have a title like this one. But it is possible to specify the title, description, icons for specific pages, and also fonts by making use of nested layouts. For example, if we come to auth here, we could add a layout for our auth segment, and I'll add a new file in auth, and I'll call it layout.tsx. And then right here, we create a component, stateless functional component. The name doesn't really matter, but we can say auth layout. The only thing that matters is this file. The naming should be layout.tsx. and then right here we can be able to return something. In this case, I will return a div. Then right here we'll be able to receive props, and the prop that we'll receive is the children prop, the same as our layout here where we received children, and then we had this particular type, read only children of type React node. So what I will do is to copy this part here, and I'll come right here and I'll say full colon, and I paste it here. So I will save to auto format. Basically, we are receiving the children prop, which we will be able to show right here. Now these children will be the different pages under our auth segment, meaning that the layout will now be shared by our login page, register page, and any other page that we would add in auth. And to confirm that, we could have a navbar for our auth, and right here I'll just say nav, and I'll say auth nav, and this part of our layout will now be shared by these pages. So let's see if that works. I will go to the browser. Let's visit one of the pages, which was login, hit enter, and there we go. We have this auth nav, and I can come here and I'll say register. I hit enter, and look at register, we also have this auth nav, so it is being shared between those two pages. But if I happen to visit our user page and we have an ID of a user like 1, you'll notice that we don't have that auth nav, because that particular layout is only shared by our auth segment. So this is how you could add a nested layout. You can also add a title for the auth segments. So what I could do is to come here and I copy this metadata object, and at the top here I will enter and I'll paste it here. I'll make sure to import metadata type. So I'll click here, control space, and I'll be able to import that from Next. Now right here we could say auth web dev blog, and you can have a specific description and so on. For now, let me just remove the 2 and specify the title, and I will save. Let's confirm if our login and register page will have this specific title. For now, for our user profile, we have this as the title, but I could go to login. We go to login, and look, the title at the top there changed to auth web dev blog. We could have different title, different description, different icon, and also different fonts, because we have this nested layout which is now shared there. Now you could also add a layout at user, and that layout will be specific for pages that will be available in the user folder there. And this is just to show you, so I'll go ahead and remove it. Now in the next video, what I'll show you is how to create links between the different pages which we have already created. Right now, all we are doing is to come to the URL and navigate to a specific page. But I want us, for example, when we click profile here, I want it to take us to the user profile. So we'll see how we can do that in the next video. In this video, we will see how we can be able to navigate between the different pages, and there are 2 main ways in which we can do that in Next.js. Next.js comes with an inbuilt hook called useRouter, and it also have an inbuilt component called link. Link component is built on top of the a tag. Link is good when we have a server-side component, but when we make use of the useRouter hook, whenever we make use of a hook, that means that we must mark that component as a client component. So we only make use of the useRouter in a client component, but for the link, we can use it in both server components and client components. I can go to the components folder, layout, then navbar. After this user button, let's add a link to our login. We will use this link component. So right here, I'll say control space and I'll import it from next link. It expects us to pass a prop called href, and then we can specify the path. We'll say that this will be going to stroke login. Right here, we can say login. and I save. Now on our navbar, we will have login, and once we click that login, it will take us to stroke login. And currently you can see this component doesn't have use client at the top there, and its parent don't have use client as well, meaning that this is a server component, and we can be able to use this link component to navigate even if we are working with the server component. So let's come here. You see we have login. I will click on login, and that should take us to the stroke login page, just like that. Now for register, instead of using the link component, I want us to make use of the use router hook. And currently I told you this navbar is being rendered from the server. So for us to make use of the use router hook, we must mark this navbar as a client component. But instead of making the entire of the navbar to be a client component, we could create a component specifically for the register route, and then we can make that component to be client component. So let's actually do that. Right here, I can say register route, then I'll say register, actually I'll say register button, okay, like that. And I can rename this to register button. That is much more better. And we'll make this to be actually a button. I'll say button register. I will make this component to be a client component by coming here and saying use client. And now right here, I'll be able to make use of the use router hook from Next navigation. This is the latest one, and we invoke that, and here we'll say const router is equals to use router, and we invoke it. So we will add an on click event here, and we'll say arrow function here, and right here we'll have now router dot push. We invoke that, and we specify the path or the route is register. Once we click on this button, we'll be able to go to the register with the help of our use router hook. So let's make use of this register button in our navbar. I can come here and I'll say register button, and I get an auto suggestion here, and then I self close it like that. Now if I navigate to the top here, you'll see it's coming from our register button. What we have done, we have created this register button, and we have made it to be a client component, and once we click on it, it will take us to the register page. So let's test that. I'll come back here, and look, we have register here. Let's click on register, and there we go. We are now on the register page. We can click on login. We are on login page. For login, we made use of the link component. For register, we made use of the use router hook. So you could use both, but I want to be consistent, and in this case I'll just make use of the link component for both. So I'll just duplicate this link component, and I'll say here register. It's also easier to do this, right? And I'll say here register, and for this one I will remove it. There are situations where we'll be making use of that use router, but for now we can just make use of the link component. The thing is, I have showed you how to use this early in the course, so let me remove this component just to show you how to make use of that use router. And let's be consistent in this case with the link component. Let's go to register, we go to the register, login, we go to login. So this link component is built on top of our a tag. You can see a component that extends HTML a element to provide prefetching and client-side navigation between routes. Let's make sure that we push our changes to GitHub, where we have added our login, register, and the user page, and added link between them. If you come right here to this icon, this is our source control. If I click on this, you'll see we can be able to directly push our changes to GitHub from here. So I'll write the commit message here and I'll say created login register and user pages, and I commit. Once I commit, I can sync changes. So this is pushing the code to GitHub. I click on that one and I think they were pushed. So we can confirm by going to GitHub. So on GitHub, go to repositories and visit your repository for this project. I have the commit, created login register and user pages. So that is good. Now in the next section, I want us to start working on our login and register forms. So I'll see you on the next one.